All right, Mayor Ortiz, we're all set.
Great. Thank you very much. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to our mid-year budget study session for March 16th, 2022. We are calling the meeting to order at 6:31. And with that, we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And you know what? I'm going to ask our finance director to lead us in the pledge since she's the star of the show tonight. Are you okay with that, Helen? You want me to call someone else? You're on mute.
You might want to call on someone else.
Okay.
Mayor.
Well, then we'll have the city manager lead us on the pledge.
Shouldn't have said anything.
I know.
All right, Megan, are you going to have a flag?
I can't find it, so let's.
Okay,
No.
we'll
flag.
just pretend we have a flag.
All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And with that, we'll move on to roll call. Megan?
Councilmember O'Brien?
Here.
Councilmember Beach?
Here.
Councilmember Colson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg?
Here.
Mayor Ortiz?
Here. Thank you. And then with that, we will move on to public comment. Item number 4, this is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. And back to the city clerk. Do we have any public comment?
We do. I have an email from Menino Velasco. He says, "Thank you for holding this important mid-year budget meeting. This is a plea to urge you to get better results from our city paid consultants. The latest example of poor results is the Broadway lighting project, which ended up with poles in the middle of the sidewalk. The explanation that there were utility conflicts is hardly the exculpatory excuse it appears to be. Every project has potential utility conflicts. In this case, the burden of responsibility lies with the hired design consultant. After all, they were handsomely paid tens of thousands of dollars to design it over a multi-year period. Why did they not anticipate the issue during design? Why did they not properly do exploratory potholes and identify the conflicts early on? Why did they end up submitting a design that was so flawed it was not buildable? Because they did a poor job, the construction team had to resort to poles in the middle of the sidewalk. To add insult to injury, the resulting pole locations do not match where the lighting analysis said they should be. This is not fair to us. Other recent examples are the consultant who designed a substandard bike lane that now needs to be fixed and funded, or the line hoe consultant who put in painted median lines that don't make sense and are largely ineffective. These consultants are getting paid our precious Burlingame tax dollars. They are not, however, delivering satisfactory products, despite their colorful slide decks. We're not getting our money's worth. We deserve better as taxpayers." And then I don't see anyone with their hand up, so.
Very good. So thank you, Mr. Velasco. And then we will move on to item number 5. And I believe this is the adoption of the resolution amending our fiscal year 21-22 operating and capital budgets. So I will pass it on to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Ortiz. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and any members of the public who are watching this evening. I'm going to quickly pass over to our finance director, Helen Uscott. But before I do, I just wanted us all to reflect for a moment that it was 2 years ago this evening that we asked the council to adopt an emergency declaration and shut down the city, and along with all the other cities in the state, and shortly thereafter the entire country. And it's been a roller coaster since then. Our budget reflects that. We were predicting a return, not a complete return, but somewhat of a return in our transient occupancy tax revenues. And that didn't occur. We have variants that have come along, Delta and Omicron, just to name 2 of the more recent ones, that have continued to make our revenues go sideways on us. And so you'll be seeing what we have. Some of our revenues came in better than projected, some worse, namely the transient occupancy tax. But through it all, we have, tried to keep a pretty firm grasp on our spending and keep that down. And we'll be talking about various adjustments, a few personnel changes that we'd like you to approve this evening. And then Helen will be going over our 5-year forecast. And normally the 5-year forecast is, not the easiest thing in the world to put together, but we have some good ways of projecting revenues. And in this case, all bets are off. She's put together, what we know now using the information that we have now. But, if another variant comes along and the economy slows to a crawl again, things will change. So we are doing our best in the city staff and particularly the finance department. They've been working short-staffed and have been doing a phenomenal job nonetheless of getting everything done. And so I wanted to acknowledge Helen and her staff for all the hard work that they've done over the past several months. And with that, I will turn it over to Helen to walk you through our mid-year budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to share screen here. You're able to see my screen here? Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council member. Thank you so much for the opportunity to review the mid-year financial update for fiscal year 21-22. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to inform Council and the public as to the city's status midway through this current fiscal year, and an updated budget based on projected result, provide a base point as we enter 2022-23 budget development, and then long-term financial forecasting. Here's the agenda for tonight's presentation. We will start presentation by taking a look where did we start fiscal year. And we will spend quite some time to review the city general fund projections, which include both revenue and expenditure, as well as the general fund reserve balance. We will also cover projection for other funds than general fund, followed by personnel classification position changes. Before we dive in 5-year forecast and other funding need, we will leave some pause for questions. At the end, we'll have time for additional questions or comments. So let's start with where we were almost a year ago when we were developing current year budget. There was a lot of uncertainty around what the pandemic would be and then how long the will be lasting. The city's approach was to maintain city services while minimize draw from general fund reserve to the extent possible. At that time, I was not here. This budget is your guys' budget. So on June 21st, 2021, the City Council adopted almost 118 million citywide budget for fiscal year 21-22. As indicated in the pie chart here, the majority of the expenditure, 63.82 million, is general fund, which is almost 54% general fund funding, which fund the city main operating here. Next slide. Please let me know if I'm too quick or too fast. If you have questions, please jump in anytime. At that time, we budget total resource for the year is $67.8 million. The total required spending about $70.6 million. Therefore, we enter the year with a deficit spending about $3.6 million. You might question for me, like prior slide, I showed 63.82 million, why we here have 70.63 million. I will go into more details next slide here. So for this slide, we add more detailed information about how we come up with 70.63 million. What's different between these two slides, how we allocate the general fund revenue. General fund revenue to use to cover operating expenditure, which is 63.82. This show up on the first slide. And then we'll also need to transfer out $3.16 million for capital improvement project. And we also transfer out for $3.6 million for debt service obligation. In addition to that, we also include the pension trust funding, 1.85. That's only for general fund. And then for the citywide, we contribute 2.3 million citywide pension trust fund contribution. Therefore, we come to $3.6 million. Here's the picture for where we start year with. At the time of this middle year report, revenue are projected to come to 1.4 million or 2.1% higher than anticipated than the adopt budget. Some key adjustment are the property tax here and the sales tax and the TOT tax. We also see increase projection for charge for services, as well as federal COVID relief fund. I will cover a few of those in the following slide. So as you know, property tax, sales tax, and the TOT tax revenue make up nearly 80% of city's general fund resources. So in talk about the big three, we cover a large part of general fund revenue. We project 1.9 million increase for property tax. This mainly contribute from ERAF and VLF tax. Property tax in general remain relatively solid, except for some takeaway from state or county. They have a complete calculation for ERAF or VLF tax. For the sales tax and the TOT tax have been most react to the pandemic environment and the most economic sensitive resource for the city revenue. Sales tax performed much better than we expected. The revenue are now projected to be $1.3 million higher than adopted budget. Historically, TOT tax is the Burlingame's largest general fund revenue source. We collect $29.4 million in fiscal year 2018-19, which is the highest collection ever. And then when the pandemic hit in March 2020, we see a decrease for TOT tax revenue is about $20 million, not as bad because it's only one quarter. But in 2021, the revenue plunged to 5.7. As of January 2022, the city collect $6.1 million TOT tax in 7 months. We project a reduction for this revenue source, $3.5 million from adopted budget. This chart shows third quarter 2021 sales tax result. The fourth quarter result will not be available until middle of April. You can see from this graph the comparison from a year ago, third quarter 2020, and then pre-pandemic 2019. We are certainly doing better than almost all categories than last year, but we're also getting closer, or some categories maybe exceed the 2019 level, so pre-pandemic level. We're doing well on the sales tax end. As mentioned earlier, the TOT revenue impact by the Delta Omicron variants and the travel restriction for the first half of the fiscal year. The city collects 6.1 for last 7 months. The average $860,000 per month. You can see from this graph, we are nowhere near the pre-pandemic level, 2018-19, but we're certainly doing better than last year. We will provide the council with more update as we go into May. So here's the green one is for 2021. It's really bad year for us, and so we're certainly doing better, almost double last year's. So this slide summarizes the proposed general fund revenue amendment. We have already addressed the big three revenue, and I will not repeat here again. So other area I want to cover is the charge for services. You can see almost $790,000 increase. There are also three big contributors for this increases. One of them is the police department. They receive $156,000 reimbursement for their provide security service for Apple Store on the Burlingame Avenue. And also Public Work Engineer Division project $380,000 increase for their services like plan checks or other engineer-related services. Community Development and Planning Division also project $250,000 increase for their planning fee and plan check fees. Federal COVID Relief Fund, at the time we developed budget, we estimated about the total money we're going to receive about 5.8 million split 2 years. Now we anticipate a total around $7.4 million. Therefore, we made an upward adjustment of $795,000 to give to us $3.7 million for this revenue source. Before we leave a discussion for current year revenue, this graph places current year revenue in perspective with actual revenue of past 4 years. We will see similar information for the expenditure side. So the revenue side, we are certainly doing better than last year and are getting close to 19, 20, 17, 18, but certainly shy from the 18-19 actual. As part of the middle year analysis general fund, all the departments were asked to examine their year-to-date budget versus actual report, and then noted any discrepancy or any area needed to be more funding for carry out the remaining of the year, the work related. So we also asked them to identify where the significant budget savings may occur. Again, we are trying to do this, provide the most accurate picture operation need within a budget. And by identifying those adjustments or changes, it makes budget more transparent and give us a better starting picture when we go in to develop 2022-23 budget. So here's the expenditure side. The detail is in my staff report. If you look at this number, we are amending 1.3, close $1.4 million expenditure increases. Out of this, majority of them is from park related. This number $1 million is include 276,000 eucalyptus tree emergency service, and the $750,000 we charge as internal service fund allocation to fund our insurance liability settlement for the year. As you might recall, we have one big settlement this year, so to cover this expense. Other than that, I note on the slide, the city implemented GASB 84 as the end of fiscal year 2021. The requirement to recategorize some funds. This dollar amount for HR, $30,000, is for the deferred compensation account fund. Used to be as agency fund, custodian fund, but due to this implementation is not qualified under this category, we had to combine this as a sub fund for general fund. Since it's a general fund, we had to make a budget request. The projection is $30,000. It's not real budget increase, but we needed to present the council for authorization. For PD, police department, the 142,000 is more staffing deal with, provide service for Apple Store, and as well as during COVID-19, the staff shortage or coverage, which is offset by the revenue. Public work engineer department, they request for $80,000 for a part-time budget. This to cover their additional need for the demand for their services. Community development, they request $65,000 for two different contracts. One is for their digital filing system. The other one is for commercial linkage fee study. So library, they request very minimal $17,000 to cover their some unanticipated contract cost by the Peninsula Library System. So, from this slide, you can see limited expenditure budget are higher than last year and back to the 2018, 19, 19, 20 level. So pretty much a level there. Beside departmental expenditure line here, the 65,000 for current year's new projections, $65 million, sorry. General fund also cover transfer out to capital for $3.3 million, and also debt service is about $3.6 million. This last column show the changes both for revenue side and also expenditure side. Is summarized previous slide. You can see $1.4 million revenue increase and a $1.3 million expenditure increase. And then we also made a small adjustment for transfer. So by the end of the day, we actually see $36,000 surplus, very small dollar amount. The bottom line is we're still in the red. We're with $2.4 million deficit before transfer for pension trust. This graph just put the revenue expenditure from past 4 years and past current year together. You can see each year we came in with a surplus. Even though for the current year, we are projected to finish year in the red. However, we are hoping we can do this again, at the year end, we can see a small surplus at the year end. So we're
Ellen, before you move on, can I just make a note on that? So, and I know that our prior finance director, Carol Augustine, used to say that the budgeted levels for each department are the maximum that the departments can spend, but it's rare that the departments spend to that level, particularly in the area of personnel, because we have vacancies throughout the year. My office, we had 2 vacancies for over 3 months. So even though I have a certain level of budget for salaries and benefits, I'm not going to spend that because I had those vacancies and then the people I hired come in at a lower step. And that happens throughout the organization. And that's why even though we have this mismatch now between our revenues and expenditures, it's likely that some of that gap will be made up and perhaps all of it, and perhaps we'll even tilt the other direction. So it looks a little more grim than what we actually expect to see at the end of the year. Thanks, Helen.
No problem. Thank you. So this slide showing prior year actual, we already have an audit result. So the fiscal year 2020-21, our ending fund balance is $45 million. And then with the new 2021-22 fund balance projection, which we ended during the middle year, we are showing almost $43 million. Even though we are lower than last year, but however, we are in much better shape than when we adopt a budget. When we adopt budget, we project only $37 million. So this mainly thanks to the federal COVID relief fund to help us to keep our fund balance. So for the here you can see the economic stability reserve increase. The reason increase is due to the increase in our revenue side. This is counted about 24% of mid-year projected revenue. So with that, kudos to the city council and the city leadership had to keep this reserve structure, which is I don't see it very often, but it's very good structure, very smart structure. This approach help keep the city's finance as stable as possible through economic downturn, as we currently experience right now. So the amount of the pension trust here, $17.5 million, is shown as restricted fund balance. Normally, this is kind of restricted for pension purpose only. It's not available for council appropriation. However, if we do really need money to pay, maintain our operation, we can draw this money to pay for our incurred pension cost. So we'll help our budget. Now we have $6.2 million unsigned balance without considering investment mark-to-market adjustment. However, we know this fund balance will be improved when we have some budget savings realized towards the end of the year, like Lisa mentioned early, some vacancy savings, etc. We will have much better numbers when we come back in May, present our proposed budget for next fiscal year. So next 3 slides, I'm going to show you the budget adjustment for fund other than general fund. You can find this information from a resolution. So I'm pretty much in my slide is kind of copy exactly same information from a resolution. By doing this, we are make sure we analyze all the long-term, the funds, long-term physical health of each of those funds. As important to know is the general fund should not subsidize this fund. Each of those individual funds stay healthy will be reduce the burden for general fund to backfill them. So this slide is showing from revenue side, we can see recover for all these funds, and the real increase is only about $860,000 because of the $750,000 for general liability insurance fund is basically the fund we charge to general fund, bring to insurance service fund to fund our liability insurance. Is more accounting side mechanic to bring the fund over, and then we pay out from this fund, how we manage the fund itself. So as the COVID-19 restriction relaxed and people started going out to shop and dine and travel, which result in increase for gas tax, a total $92,000 is the first 2 lines combined. And also we see $429,000 for parking revenue increases. The building division also have very active activity this year. The revenue project about $338,000 higher than initial anticipated. As I mentioned, in this here is also, just want to reemphasize the $750 is for the internal service charge, is not new revenue. So. This slide shows expenditure side for other funds. Again, the major impact is the insurance claim. So without seeing that, you only see about a $300,000-$400,000 increase, very minimal. There are also a small changes to general fund transfer, about 30,000 to special revenue fund included resolution. On this Park and Rec Center, they receive cell tower lease payment from T-Mobile. I think many years ago, after this payment, the council approved each year we transfer $5,000 to fund the tree planting program. Somehow, the city starting doing that for 6 years, and then for whatever reason, transfer stopped. Now we discovered this, and then we proposed to catch up for 6 missing years payment from 16, 17 through 21, 20, 22. So just bring to your attention here. So now we come to personnel classification position changes. Before I start this, any questions, comments? Historically, the city only bring forward any personnel changes during the middle year or new budget process. This slide solely requests personnel classification change for this year. For building department and the city manager office, as well as the library, the change is very straightforward. The building department, the changes is not general fund related position, is funded by building fund. I will talk about more finance reorg in the following 2 slides. So this is a finance department current organization chart. Unlike other cities, the city Burlingame finance department also oversee IT function. Currently, the IT services contract with Redwood City for past 20 plus years. We received notice from Redwood City early this year. They decide withdraw their service starting in the new fiscal year 22-23. They have been serving few agencies around this area. They are just trying to get out of business. The city is currently in the process finding a new vendor. We are hoping can bring forward to council authorization approval for the new contract in the coming month. Based on this picture, you can see historically with about 11.2 FT department, the deputy finance director always see the majority finance department's daily operation, which is a lot to ask for one position. Recently, in my staff report state, we lost our deputy director to another agency. So this prompt reorg we present to you today. And then the proposed organization chart is showing here. This structure will allow us create a more balanced structure and a more sustainable structure. So it's not only rely on one person. We break down that position to 2 manager position. One position focus more general ledger side, audit, and then accounts receivable, payable. And then another position is more focused on the system maintenance and then payroll side as well as utility side. So now we put the burden on 2 different pieces. 2 people cover the operating side. Then we have opportunity for cross training and staff development. And then when one person leave, you still have another person can backfill and then carry on the business, rather than currently we really suffering from lose our deputy director. So, and I think now it's a good place to stop and see if anyone have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Director Scott. Colleagues, any questions for the director? I see Councilmember Colson. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So 2 questions, the easy one first. On the investment portfolio, Director Scott, are we, right now we have a 0. So if we have a negative year, like if performance results are negative, even on our short-term investment portfolio, would we have a paper loss that would show up in that position?
I don't see we're going to have a negative. For example, our interest income side, I checked as December, we are half year we receive half year we budgeted, right? We are right on a target. We are hoping the next half year we will doing better. For mark-to-market adjustment. Normally I kind of look at my predecessor's report, same like she include that. That's kind of just sort of like a plug number there. If you look at the true fund balance, how much is, and then just reduce the number by that. So, I think the city's investment approach is very conservative. We are invest more secured fund. We have a lot of funding invest in the LAIF and also our investment management company, PFM. They also really look at our portfolio based on our investment policy to balance our portfolio. While currently we don't see a loss at this point.
Okay, great. And then the second comment is something we've discussed in the past, which I don't think we need. I just want to remind everybody, and maybe later in the discussion, we can think about it. Maybe at the new year when we put the new budget together, which is the contingency reserve budget is a percentage of the budget. So as the budget declines, because we're in a fiscally tenuous time, the reserve declines as well. And that might be good. It might be bad. I don't know. But I was thinking about it a little more, and I'm almost wondering if it should be like a 3-year rolling average or something that kind of smooths it a little bit so that we don't always have this number that's sort of moving up and down that's predicated on a boom year or a bust year. And then that number being so volatile. So I don't need an answer on that. It's just a reminder to think about it and maybe how we could smooth that in a way that might be helpful.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just a couple of different questions, Director Yu, Scott, and thank you for the presentation. I realize we're in the mid-year budget, revision, but so I'm just going to go in sort of chronological order. The expenditures, so this is the general fund operating summary table, and departmental expenditures from FY 2021 actuals, where it was 58.4 million. And then in 21-22 current budget, we authorized 64.4 million. So that was a $6 million increase. And I'm trying to remember, and this may be a question for our city manager, where that 6 million went. Because that's a large jump in departmental expenditures at a time when obviously all of our budgeting was in a difficult place. And I'm just trying to remind myself where that uplift went. Was it all over government, or was it?
So I don't recall exactly, but that's the actuals, not what was budgeted. So it may be that the budgeted number was higher and we came in lower because we
Vacancies.
unfortunately had to lay off a number of our part-time staff due to COVID. So whatever our budgeted number for expenditures was, I would imagine was a higher number. I just don't recall where it was exactly. So it's probably not a $6 million change. It's probably somewhere south of that.
I would find it helpful maybe later if you could drop a note, just because, and maybe it's just that, as the director was saying, we, or you were saying, we estimate full budget expenditures and then we don't actually spend everything and it comes in less. But I think for the average person, they might look at these numbers and say, gosh, how did you approve a 10% increase in budget when your revenue was falling? You know what I mean? It might be helpful to remind ourselves why those numbers are so disparate.
Right. So I'm gonna 99% guarantee you didn't approve a 10% increase, but while you're asking other questions, I'm gonna see if I can pull up online our budget and see if I can figure it out.
Thank you.
You're doing that.
Yep.
Actually,
Unless Helen has some of that.
Yeah, I have the May 12 report. The proposed budget is $63.6 million for general fund.
I'm sorry, say that again.
63.6.
63.
So 63.6. So it actually, we came in significantly under budget that year.
I see. So one might say that the 64 number, even though we've revised it upwards, we actually expect the final number to be appreciably below that. That's sort of the answer.
Yes.
Right. That's what we're hoping for. Correct.
Okay.
And also like when we get to the audit time, when the auditor look at it, they need to make sure we are follow our budget policy. They don't want to see us our budget. So for that protection purpose, also we want to have enough authorization, finish year instead of have lacking, then we have fundings from auditor as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a fan in trying to forecast what you really think you're going to spend, but I understand that sometimes I guess there's reasons to pad things. I mean, I get it. I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I understand the rationale. On the reserves, I've always been a little puzzled that the capital investment reserve, we don't hold that in our reporting on general fund balance assignments. Is that right? I mean, it doesn't show up on.
Yes, that's correct. Once the council authorized for the reserve, we will transfer out a general fund, put aside. Currently, we have about $21 million reserve, which is outspoken. One of them for the grade separation, and then also for utility, our communal utility projects.
I'm not doubting at all that we have good uses for that capital. It's just in terms of understanding what we actually have in reserve. One just has to remind oneself that the table that says general fund balance assignments is not actually in some ways complete. It's missing, to my mind, it's sort of missing a big line item. But that's, I get it. I'll save my hardest question for last. My next question, and second to last question, is I think this is more by way of a suggestion. Obviously, we're still in COVID times, and this, the recovery is anybody's guess. But I think there will be a useful utility in us looking back at this period, which is likely to be the worst. I mean, I'd have to go back to 2008-9, and that's when Councilwoman O'Brien and I were here. But I have to imagine that fall in revenue was the worst that we've suffered probably in 50 years. And it will be interesting to look back and say to ourselves, what was the level of reserves that we needed to weather that storm? Because I can't imagine it getting worse than what we've just been through. And the reason that's interesting is because it then informs a little to Councilwoman Colson's point, what do we need to hold in reserve, should the worst happen again? So that's more by way of a comment. My last question is, I think, and again, you have to make your forecasts when you make them, and without the benefit of current information, but it seems very likely that all of our costs are going to go up, and with inflation. And I wonder how you would advise this council to think about inflation impacting this budget. For example, somewhere in here is an assertion or an assumption, sorry, that labor costs will go up 3% per year. I think it would be helpful maybe at the next budget session to think about what does life look like in a rising inflation environment for our budget, and does that change what we should think about in terms of reserves and so forth? But I wonder, maybe, Director, if you have a point of view about how inflation will change the way you think about our budgeting going forward. And I'll finish with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Director Scott, do you have any comments on the inflation question?
So yeah, we certainly recognize the inflation right now. As of February, the CPI adjustment is 7.9%, really high. And also, we're certainly facing the challenging to recruit people, because right now seem like a very tight market for all those kind of stuff. So we want able to have the budget or reserve to able to pay for all this. However, I think we have to live within our means, right? How much we can afford. And then that will be subject to negotiation, labor negotiation, how we can afford. Maybe we can think outside the box, different way to provide the services. So, I think as we are suffering, our residents also suffering, we cannot just unlimited to, impose tax, all this kind of stuff. We really need to look at the revenue and the expenditure side, and then find the happy median. So.
Thank you.
I see Councilmember O'Brien.
Actually, my question was related to inflation, so it was already asked. But thank you, Vice Mayor Brownrigg, because that was my concern, seeing the inflation at 7.9, how that's going to affect our budget futuristically, and knowing that, our TOT still, our hotels are still going to take a couple of years to kind of get back to where they were. So, how that, also ties in. I was actually curious. Do we kind of know what the average reserve is for most cities? What percentage do they usually follow?
I think most city is about 20%. Some city may be better and some city even worse. I think for the agency I worked for, Town Sansom, they have reserve policy is 10%, but our goal is for 20%. It really varies from agency to agency. I think a majority is best practice, about 20-25%. Yeah.
Okay.
You may recall, if I could just add something about our reserve policy. Gosh, I don't remember how many years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, we asked the Government Finance Officers Association to come in and do a big analysis for us. And that's how we ended up with these targets, through them looking at our revenue volatility, where we were vulnerable, particularly because we were so heavily reliant on transient occupancy tax, and the fact that we're in an earthquake area and all of that. They put it all into the blender and came out with this policy. So it wasn't, the numbers were not just picked out of thin air. It was a very skillful analysis by people who do this for a living to help us come up with what it should look like.
And I totally understand that. I'm just saying, kind of in comparison to other cities,
Right.
my
I think
assumption
we're
here is
better
that
off.
Burlingame is doing pretty good.
I think we do. I think we are, we're pretty conservative in the way we budget, and we're pretty conservative in saving money for a rainy day.
Right. And that was kind of the point I wanted to make, for the public, is that, we do this for a reason, and it's for times like this where, you're not getting the expected revenue, and at least we have a cushion there. And, our TOT, like I said, is going to take a couple of years to rebound. And that's why I think, the council needs to look at other ways of bringing in revenue. And that's one of the reasons why we've been talking about the business tax. I actually had a question of curiosity, and you may not know the answer now. It said in here, I think the business tax was established in 1978, and it hadn't been adjusted since 2001. So I was curious, in 2001, what was it adjusted from? Because we have $100 now. So what was it before that?
I believe either $50. I think it's $50. Yeah, okay. I think we made adjustment to $100.
Okay, thank you. Very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Colson.
Thank you. So just going back to this inflation question, the place is one of the places it's likely to show up is in the pension, depending on how I don't know, Lisa, you might know how the pensions are constructed. So the cost of living index, I don't know if it's capped or if it's like an open-ended, but if we had really high inflation with open-ended, COLAs, that projection is part of the actuarial work and would be included in the discount rate. And usually we're projecting 3% from the work I've always done, 3, 4, 5. If it were to be 7, 8, 9, 10, obviously it jack up our pension liability, which would then transfer through in terms of increased pension cost, unless the amortization schedule were lengthened. So maybe that's one of the more important places we would look. down the
I
road.
think that Sonia just raised her hand, so I think she has some
Oh,
intel
great.
for
Yeah,
us on that.
okay. Yeah, very good point. I like that one. Director Morrison,
Hi, yes. So it is capped by contract at 2% per year.
the pensions.
What are they again, Sonia?
2%.
So they're capped at 2%?
Yeah.
COLA? Okay,
Yep.
great. That's so good to know. All right.
Yeah, very good. Okay, colleagues, any other questions? I do have a couple questions. I'm going to go back to the business licenses because I found this very interesting when we were considering an increase. It shows that we're budgeting 700,000. Do you have a sense, Director, of what is, and it looked on your org chart that there's one person who's dedicated 100% to the business licenses?
Actually, that staff is not is kind of sort of like maybe 75% dedicated for business license tax, and then 25% also help with utility, phone calls, activities. So, yeah.
Okay, and do you have a sense of what the cost of that one individual is?
I would say the total compensation probably around maybe $150,000-ish.
Okay, so just when we're considering this in the future, we're taking in 700,000 and the cost with just personnel is somewhere around the 100,000, just allocating just the portion that she uses for the business licenses. So anyway, I thank you for that. And I had one other question, but I kind of seem to have lost it right now. So with that, colleagues, any other questions? Then we will open it to the public. Madam City Clerk.
Sorry about that. I don't have any emails. Let me just check again. No emails on this, and I don't see any hands up. So we're good to go to the 5-year forecast.
I think before we move on to that, do we ask for actions?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
we have
so-
two resolutions for you.
Okay, so back to those two resolutions. So I will bring it back to my colleagues for final comments, and I would entertain a motion if somebody would care to do that.
I'll make a motion to approve. The only other comment I would have though on that motion is just, I agree with the mayor that when you look at this budget, it really highlights the importance of diversifying the revenue base and the importance to continue the conversation around the business licensing tax or business licensing fee, I guess I should call it. But thank you. But I'll make a motion to approve the budget as amended.
And what was the other adoption of resolution authorizing position amendments and adopting amendment?
If
City
we
of
could just
Burlingame?
take them one at a time.
Very good. Okay,
Mayor?
so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
it.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Coulson, second by Councilmember O'Brien. Can we
Can I-
have roll call, please?
Is there going to be a comment on the motion?
I wanted to make a quick comment on the motion and I support it. I just wanted to say what I know we all think, but just to make it explicit, and that is a real pat on the back and commendation to our city manager and to the city staff. You know, for an operation to drop from 75 million in revenue to 50 million in revenue, which is effectively what happened over 2 years with the loss of hotel tax. For us to go through that kind of revenue drop, and for most residents to see not a single blip in service, in police, in sidewalks, in parks, the library impact was entirely COVID related. I just think it's, we all get beat up a lot. And I just think it's worth pausing for a moment to say, we did a hell of a job through this downturn, and we all know where that starts, and that's with the city manager and the team. So, we have a lot of work to do, and we're not ever going to be done, but it's worth just taking a pause for a second and reflecting on how well we managed through a really dramatic drop in revenue.
Yeah, here. I'm 100% with you. Thank you. That's
Thank
a
you
great
so much.
comment. So once
Staff and I
again,
appreciate it.
we have a Motion from Councilmember Coulson, a second by Councilmember O'Brien. We could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes. And with that, we move on to the second resolution. If I could have one of my colleagues make a motion.
A motion to approve the authorization of position amendments and salary schedule.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Brien. Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilmember O'Brien, and seconded by Vice Mayor Brownrigg. Could we have roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg,
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes, thank you. And so with that, we move on to, okay, we're going to go back to the five-year plan. So I'm handing it back to our Finance Director, Scott.
Great, thank you. Now, for the overview of 5-year forecasting, we will review the city's top revenue with our projection for next 5 years, and also expenditures. As I mentioned previously, the current budget newly adjusted with new mid-year analysis usually set a stage for the next fiscal year budget development. Typically, 2020-21, the columns showing the 5-year would be the most accurate of all the years, because that's the information we know the most. So, however, I want to also point out a number for 22-23 are not a final number. The budget process will include a lot rolling up each line item for the revenue and also departmental expenditures program. This process, we just kick it off. We have the information coming in as we speak. And then in the next couple of months, the staff going to, thumb through all this detailed information, meet with city manager and department head to go over this information. Hopefully we will have better information present to you when we come back for the proposed budget. So.
Great.
Here's the Burlingame revenue mix for 21-22 as adjusted. There are some changes to the pie structure than the pre-pandemic time. As we talked about them so many times, the TOT used to be the largest revenue source. Now it's back down to the third largest, is only 14.6%. The property tax right now becoming the #1 tax generator for us. So out of this top 3 account, about 78% of pie, and then last year is about 73%. So we are seeing some improvement for our revenue in overall. This slide just gave you a different way to look at it, all those revenue sources, how they compose, and with the dollar amount. And then you can see the blue is property tax, very steady growth. And the orange one is the sales tax. We are, recovering well. So for the TOT, you can see a huge decrease in the gray area for 2020-21. And then we are bouncing back right now, almost double from last year, but we are still have a long way to go to meet the 2018-19 dollar amount. So other revenues pretty much stable, 16-15. We are recovered right now. So here's our projections for property tax. So the property tax, we are based on the latest information from the county provided for our assessed value. We are seeing slight increase from last year growth. Last year we have 5.13%, and this year we see 5.8%. So we are projected 6% going forward. As the next few months, we continue monitoring the assessed value and then determine what is realistic adjustment for us moving forward. So I think the contribution for those growth is more the housing price continue to help our locally property tax. Besides the assessment value, additional assumption for the property tax also include flat rate of the ERAF distribution. The city have been project about $2.5 million, which is include these projections. In reality, actually, this year we received $3.5 million. Just as yesterday, I also received a county's notification. We're going to receive another $136,000 for the refund we entitled based on fiscal year 1920 fiscal year. So we will see a better result for the ERAF distribution this year. So, all this number, the county for the ERAF account, they always tell us that they will going to disappear one day. So they want us to treat it as a one-time revenue. But however, we for the last few years, we continue to see this revenue source keep growing. Be conservative, we put in flat rate as 2.5. So we don't want to count it too much, but we don't want to ignore it totally at all. So this is the property tax piece. This chart shows us for the sales tax. We expect about a 6.1% average growth in this fiscal year. For the sales tax data, we work with HDL company. They provide us number and the analysis for sales tax and then Measure I. This chart includes regular sales tax and use tax, Measure I, as well as public safety fund. Prop 172 is about half cent of sales tax. Burlingame, this year's this forecasting, we include 3.6% for regular sales tax for the 22-23, and also 1.3 for Measure I increase for next year. So therefore, we build in 2%, 2%, 2%, 3% for out year forecasting. We try to be on the conservative side, then over project our revenue, then we come at a loss when the year finished. So for the hotel tax, suffered a significant revenue loss due to COVID-19. Hotel industry expected 2022 is shaping up to be better year than last year, which we can see from my previous presentation. We anticipate about $10 million compared to last year, 5.7. We also expecting a slow recovery combined with property tax. TOT will be the last sector to recover by compare with property tax and sales tax. So first, property tax, we are very stable, and sales tax we see picking up. The latest forecasting for the TOT tax, where the recovery not going to happen fully, will be 2025. However, due to the COVID-19, businesses change their way to doing business. We can see from our own work, working from home, or we can have conference at home, go over Zoom. So business travel may not ever come back to the previous level. At the same time, we also see local. We might have other competitors, for example, South San Francisco, they're going to have a new hotel, Millbrae. So that will impact our mix and our TOT tax revenue. So, we hope we can get more, but it's still unknown. So before the pandemic, due to the healthy economic and then strong tourism in the San Francisco Bay Area, have been the top hotel market in the country. The Burlingame, we have experienced consistent high occupancy rate and a daily room rate. The city have been benefit from the growing resource revenue. So this slide only show from 2014-15. You can see the continued growth to 29.4 million. And then we see a drop, 20 million for 1920, and then a further decline to 5.7. So based on middle year projection, we are thinking we're going to come in $10 million. We build it in the forecasting with 35% increase for the 22-23, and then 30%, 20%, 7%, 5% escalator going up. So if we can do it better, actually, I spoke to John Cartel from the Bureau, and then he mentioned potentially we can get some rebounds in April, May. So if that's the case, we may be able to reach 11 million. So if using the same escalator, we can reach 26 million at 26, 27, which is back to the level 2016-17, almost 10 years ago. So this slide show you general fund revenue forecasting. Basically highlight the year-to-year revenue growth as different rate. Because all this revenue they impacted by different factors, and then particularly true is over the next 5 years what's going to change. So as you may recall, the revenue projection we show early, our total revenue experience about 2.1% higher than anticipated for this year, and then which is also 10.3% higher than previous year. So we now have a good base for our 5-year forecasting. In this projection, we removed the one-time federal relief fund for future projections. We did not include any economic recessions or what the impact from the war between Russia or Ukraine, those kind of stuff we don't know at this point. We continue to project this revenue as the uptrending. So if you look at all this number, you do a calculation, by the end of the day, the projection is for 22-23, we increase about 2%, 23-24, 9%, and then 24-25, 7%, and then 25-26 is 5%, and then 4% for 26-27. So for the 5-year forecasting expenditure side, we apply each major categories expenditures to forecasting the salary and the wages. Historically, the city using current payroll and then MOU into our consideration. So the forecasting going to include all the term from the MOU agreement, as well as include part-time employee. Most pay increase for our current MOU is effect January 1st and July 1st. So historically, when we do this budget, we assume no change for position. For this year, a little bit special, as you may recall, the city, I think in December, the city road field contract forward with a 1-year extension. Actually, all of our contract expired this year. Our HR director will come to council for authorization for labor negotiation at a future meeting, hopefully happen next meeting. With that, the current forecasting, we pretty much just using what we have right now as current year budget and apply escalator cross board. We did not include the personnel changes in the previous life, such as finance reorg, because we don't know if this will be approved. So we did not build in that kind of expenditure increase in this projection yet. With that, those numbers will be changed when we come back to you in May. We will have more information available, more health insurance or PERS data available for us to have better projection bring forward to you in May. For the city's benefit piece, how many different line items, different cost is kind of using different resources to project it. And one thing earlier when we talk about the pension cost, is big percentage for our personnel cost, total compensation as all a total. And then the city also, I think, have negotiated for the regular miscellaneous employee. The employee also contribute for 1.5% towards employer contribution. And then for public safety, they're 4% to pay health fund, their employer share as well. So I just want to point that out. I think the city is certainly ahead of curve and then look different options to help reduce the cost, keep up operation. So for operating cost, this include the contract supply and the material. We project a fairly broad brush assumption, like 3%. Internal service, we're using different escalator for different line item between 3 to 5%. We can see an increase, particularly in the facility maintenance cost as well. IT services related, and then at this time we don't know how our IT service contract service will be. So as we're have RFP coming in, evaluate their proposal, we will have better number for that IT service cost as well. And also the insurance, we certainly see an increase for our premium as well as settlement payment as well. So for the capital outlay item, we use a base about $250,000 for departmental capital outlay, include the furnitures, equipment. Then we build 3% escalator for the out years. So for the city's transfer out for capital improvement project, that will be covered by public works presentation tonight. Later you will receive. So and also city general fund also transfer out for debt service to those number for debt services based on, sorry, I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm kind of like the debt services will be based on the debt service schedule, and then transferring from other fund is more recovery from other fund to pay for their portion of debt service, as well as some cost recovery, such as, for example, building. We have a overhead. We need to recover for the fund from building to cover their overhead cost. And we also project for transfer to pension trust each year. We, make sure we put a fund aside to build our pension trust fund. So from this slide, you can see our cost requirement to maintain our operation certainly grow faster than our resources for next 3 years. We're hoping as more extra revenue coming in, the revenue projection will be better when we bring back to you in May. So hopefully this red number is not as big as we have right now. I think we will looking forward to bring for 22-23. So even though the current year general fund operating results so very limited unassigned fund balance, we don't have much room to transfer out to fund our capital project. However, we still want to put this list of city's long-term priority project on your radar, so we don't lose sight of those. When we do have funding, we're able to fund those projects. Before I conclude my presentation, I want also to express my sincere appreciation to City Manager Lisa Goldman for her guidance and support, and all the department head for their timely proposal and thorough analysis, and many other team leaders and staff for their input and contribution for this process. I also want to thank my department staff for their support, and when we have short staff, and I'm new to my role, they provide my support as well. This budget process is truly a result of a collaboration and teamwork. Last but not least, I also want to show my appreciation to council member for your guys' visionary leadership, and then pay a very close attention to all the financial matters, and then you guys financial expertise on different level. Really appreciate it, you guys, for your support and guidance as well. With that, I'm here to answer any question you may have.
Great, thank you, Director Wooscott. This is a really pretty amazing undertaking for you in your first year here, so we appreciate all your efforts. And colleagues, anybody have questions about the 5-year projection? And I see now, there's, all of a sudden they come up. Councilmember Colson.
Thank you. So I just have 2 questions. One is on the, there's a grouping there of deferred maintenance or projects for capital. Yeah. And on city facilities, even though I know it's maybe a ways out, but I think the Parks Courtyard is eventually going to need some attention as well. So it's not on here, but it's kind of also on there in a way. I know we just finished the new community center, but I was over there recently, and there's all kinds of issues like, it's hard for women who want to work for our Parks Corp, if they ever did, we do have facilities for men and women now. We figured that out, but it could be improved. And then second was just on, I think I saw, and I just want to make clear if I did see this correctly, we are going to continue to fund the 115 account even through this. And I'm really appreciative of that because I just think that, you know, maintaining that steady stream and building that account to the reserve level we need to smooth that in the future is going to, you know, really help us if we have another, you know, massive shock to the system like this one. So I want to say that I really support that and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
So I'm glad we're on this slide. I guess my question is, if I got asked, so this is your forecast and you're planning to effectively, you know, lose money, 5 million, you know, a year for the next 3 years. Would I say to somebody, yeah, but that's okay, we have the reserves for it? Or when we put these forecasts out, especially the increase in CIP, are we actually thinking to ourselves, well, if we didn't do better on the revenue number, we probably wouldn't spend this much in CIP? Trying to understand that forecast, because at some level, it seems like if you really thought that was your revenue, you wouldn't spend so much.
So we have a couple of things going on. One is the 22-23 forecast. The departments are just putting their budgets together now, and they haven't been blessed by me yet, and then by council. So we don't actually, that forecast for expenditures is not solid yet. It's a good guess, but it's not solid yet. So that bottom line could change. But going forward, we have added more money to the CIP, and we don't have to do that. We can pull back in a number of areas to try to shrink that red number down considerably. So I think that's what you would tell people, is that, you know, we're thinking about ways that we would spend the money if we had it, but if we don't have it, we'll pull back in any number of ways while still trying to maintain services. You know, through the pandemic, we didn't lay off a single full-time staff member. And I think that was really important because we still had so many, things that we needed to provide, services we needed to provide, and we are a service organization. So much of our money goes towards personnel who are providing those services. And so, you know, we're very cautious in the way we budget. We budget our revenues conservatively because we don't want to spend beyond our means, and we budget our expenditures pretty conservatively, and we don't add staff when we don't need to. So I would expect that number, and I mentioned this really at the very beginning of the presentation, that as you're doing a 5-year forecast, it's tough in a good year, and it's really tough in a pandemic environment when we just don't know how everything's going to land. And so we have ways that we can adjust our numbers and how much we spend on various things so that we are not just eating away our reserves so that they're down to nothing.
Right. And so what I'm about to say, I mean, I counsel a lot of companies on how to think about the future. And I think a lot of time can be wasted on forecasting out 3, 4, 5 years at some level, like, you know, an artificial sense of precision that is not a great use of time. However, what I might suggest, at least what we often do, is have a base case and then an upside case. It seems to me that, you know, if this is the base case on revenue, then probably our CIP expenditures in 23, 24, 24, 25 would be appreciably less. And then maybe there's an upside case where the TOT number is appreciably higher or whatever, and then you would spend more. It seems to me that's what would happen in real life. And so therefore, as a forecast, and I'll stop with this, but it feels like we shouldn't be forecasting a 5 million deficit in 23, 24. We wouldn't allow that probably to happen, is kind of what I'm trying to get at. So I don't want to dwell on it because out year forecasts are, you know, of only some value. I worry a little about the signal it might send to people if they only looked at this and they didn't listen to the conversation.
Right. I mean, one thing is this doesn't go anywhere. You know, this is for our planning purposes as we're looking at this year's budget. It's we're not asking you to adopt this evening as a forecast. We
Yeah.
will update things as we go into the budget planning process. We have a budget study session with the council in May when we'll have more information about revenue. So, you know, I don't even remember when we started doing a 5-year forecast. I think it doesn't predate me, but I think it was early times when I had first gotten here. And I think you were the one who said,
I'm a fan of it.
Do it.
I'm a fan of it because
Right.
in terms of long-term trends and what we're going to see the next time we look at this and we start adjusting for inflation is we're going to see why trending,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So I'm a fan of it. I'm just thinking that as you know, if it's a forecast, we probably, and this was the revenue number, we wouldn't spend that much on CIP. I think that's
totally agree.
Right. And so this is a forecast and it's not going anywhere. And Syed's reminding me that it was that you had the good idea to do the 5-year forecast in the first place many years ago.
I own it. I own it.
You own it. It's your fault. No, I think it's a useful tool, and that's what it is. It's a tool to let us know, you know, kind of a little hint of where we're going, but it's
Right.
nothing is set in stone.
No,
So it'll be updated as we go forward through the budget process.
right.
Thank you for that. And Vice Mayor, I totally agree with you. The banker in me looks at those red numbers and gets very nervous. So I think that, yeah, we should acknowledge, and when we do this in the next iteration of this, we should acknowledge that if we are going to show a deficit of $5 million, we would take other measures. I think that would be important to acknowledge it. I agree with that concept. So, and I do like the 5-year forecast. I understand it's not perfect, but I think it's useful. And I think there's a conversation I had with Vice Mayor Brown before I got elected. We had a discussion and he told me that he was working on this. So I appreciate that. I think it is a good tool. Councilmember Coulson.
I've already spoken. I will have one more comment, but I would like to defer to Council Member O'Brien first, please, since she hasn't had a chance.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Yes, so I just want to agree that we just may have to look at our CIP and decrease that a bit. And I remember when Michael brought up this 5-year forecast, or I should say Vice Mayor Brownrigg. But I think it is helpful. It's even helpful too for the community to see this potential deficit because we're going through, you know, hard times. Not everything is always hunky dory, and we just have to. This is the reality. Community needs to understand that reality. But this also proves that we really need to look at diversity on the revenue we receive, and so that's why I appreciate the fact that we are looking at other potential revenue sources, such as, you know, the cannabis to put on the ballot and or, you know, the business license that we will be reviewing. So like I said, I like the 5-year forecast, and I think it is important for the community to really understand that, you know, we're going through a tough time too. And so we're trying to figure out, you know, the best way, you know, to get through this time period. And kudos to our council. We've always been very conservative and in regards to our reserves. And, you know, we are in a good spot, I think, compared to many cities. And that's also kudos to all our staff and to our city manager. So it's a hard time now, but we know it will get better, but we just have to, you know, get through these next couple of years.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Brien. I can't agree more. That's a good point. Councilmember Coulson, you ready to go? You want me to talk? Let Councilmember Beach speak. Councilmember Beach, please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's comments, and I'll just dovetail that. I also appreciate that staff gives us the opportunity to really review this, even though these numbers in the prior presentation, they're very much in flux in March. But it gives us an opportunity to kind of process, see what's coming, understand, so that the first time we're not seeing it is in May or June, right before adoption. So I think this is a very useful meeting, even though we recognize that there's a lot of unresolved, not only in the 5-year forecast, but even just towards the end of this year, projecting the next fiscal year. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. Councilmember Coulson, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ortiz. So I agree with pretty much everything everybody said. I like what Councilwoman O'Brien said. The way I'm kind of looking at this is to me, instead of looking at the big red numbers and getting scared about them, I'm looking at this as, we have a lot of big CIP projects coming down the path. We've got grade separation potentially. We think it's 15 million. It could be 25. We have El Camino Real, more work to do there. So to me, I look at this as this would be the ideal if we had this money so I know what the delta is between what we really probably need to be investing in our CIP. And so I can look at that and say 4 million, 5 million, 5.6 million. And, and then it flips around in 25, 26. So, we're going to have to defer 10 to 15 million dollars of, really important CIP work. If we have to cut this budget. So to me, I just don't think we can, you can save your way to success. I really believe that you have to invest in your community and you have to own it. And if you want the high quality services and you want the good roads and you want the grade step and you want El Camino Real to be fixed and everything to be state of the art, that we have to figure out a way, whether it's through the business licensing fees or, really just working on economic development. I really want to figure out a way to close that gap.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Sorry, and I appreciate all of the comments, and I also understand very well that the comments about diversifying revenue. So I hear those messages too. One question though that occurs to me in looking at these numbers. So it's a forecast. What was staff thinking in terms of the CIP growing from 5 to almost 10 to 13, but then down to 8.5 and 6.5? Like, is there something going on in those years that you're planning for? Is that an El Camino expense or what's happening and what drove that part of your thinking?
So I just wondering, should we segue to capital improvement so Syed can provide you guys more detailed information how they're planning CIP? Sorry.
Yeah, so we wanted, is that part of our next agenda item?
I'm happy to save the question, except I thought the next one was more like, what are we going to spend next year? And
Okay,
this is
so-
more about the thought process behind the forecast.
So
So maybe
Director Martuz,
Syed-
if you could illuminate us.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I just wanted to answer the last question as asked by Vice Mayor Brownrigg. The reason for the CIP to go up considerably and go down is that what we look at is the condition of our infrastructure. We do assessments, planning to see when a particular facility needs improvement in the 5-year plan. We actually have a 5-year plan, then we also have beyond 5-year plan that looks at long-term replacement of city infrastructure. So just looking at that plan, we have a lower expenditure based on the needs assessment, in the year 26, 27, then year 25, 25, 26. So it's just a natural condition of the condition assessment.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Martusa. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Do we have any other questions, comments? And do we need to open it to members of the public now?
We should, just in case. Yeah.
Very good. So, Madam City Clerk, it's all yours.
Don't have any emails and I don't see any hands up, so we're good to go.
Very good. So with that, I'll bring it back to my colleagues for any final comments on this item. I think we've all had quite a bit of comments, so it looks like maybe we are done. So thank you all. Those are great comments. And thank you again to our finance director. That was pretty amazing work. Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item 5B, which is review of the draft fiscal year general fund measure I, gas tax measure A, Senate Bill SB1, parking enterprise funds, public funds. Oh my, okay. I will pass it on to Madam City Manager. Will you take it?
I'm going to ask my friend Syed, who may pass it over to our Assistant Public Works Director, Art Morimoto.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa and Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to preface before Art begins his presentation that the work that you will be seeing tonight is a work by all city departments. All department heads were part of this development of the CIP program, from Parks and Recreation, Police Department, Fire Department, facilities, engineering, courtyard. Everyone contributed quite a bit to bring this program for you. Again, this is an example of what happens during the downturn of the economic conditions, as we look at different sources of revenues to fund the CIP program, not necessarily general fund, but also looking at grants and impact fees and other revenues. So here you go, Art.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. Syed said we'll be going through the fiscal year 22-23 CIP. And this is as it pertains more to the general fund. Typically, we do this at mid-year so we can get council feedback on any general fund changes prior to coming back for the final budget session in May. So here's an outline of the topics we'll be going through, the proposed CIP funding by source, and then we'll go through a list of projects. And as Syed said, this year there's multiple sources that are going to be tapped. So you'll see the general fund impacts, and then the other funding sources: gas tax, Measure A, Measure I, SB1, the Parking Enterprise Fund. Those are typically what we present at this time. And additionally, this year, we're introducing some other funding sources: public facilities impact fees and the solid waste fund, to alleviate some of the pressure on the general fund. And then we'll have another summary and then seek some council direction and feedback. So here's the proposed draft CIP by source. And as you see, the proposed general fund CIP is 3.185 million. I mean, this was 1.36 million last year. And just of note, and you'll see this later, but a large portion of this, 1.31 million of this, is for an obligation that's due to the Burlingame High School District for the aquatic facility that was done. And that funding, or those funds, are due upon completion of the rec center, which is going to happen this fiscal year. So that skews that number a bit. And then Measure I, just like last year, we're proposing 1 million for sidewalks, 1 million for streets. And then typically gas tax Measure A, SB1, that's for the street resurfacing program. And this year, some funds for the transportation projects. Parking Enterprise Fund, self-explanatory, to address any issues in the parking lots or related to parking meters. And then this year, we're tapping into public facility impact fees. And you'll see as we go through the projects, those are spread around through all the different projects and how those funds were allocated. And then solid waste fund, we're tapping that for some purchases of trash receptacles that are required per new state regulations. And then this budget this time includes a large number there for grants. And some of these grants the city has been awarded, and we're supplementing with the match funds right now. And then other grants you'll see mostly with the transportation funds. We're anticipating a lot of grant opportunities, and so we're taking this CIP to fund match money. So in the event that the appropriate grant becomes available, that we have some certainty for some match money in applying for those grants. And so the total, the total request with everything, but this also includes the grants, is 12.6695 million. And I think the major focus, as usual, is the general fund, which is the 3.185. And typically these programs, parks and rec improvements, bike ped traffic improvements, building facility improvements, this is what the general fund typically funds. And here's the breakdown for those programs. You see nothing for building facility improvements. We're going to tap other sources for those projects. And again, I just want to mention the obligation to the high school district kind of brings the Parks and Rec budget up a bit there. So going through the actual listing of projects, the aquatic facility, that is what I mentioned a few times. That's for the to fund the previous obligation to the high school district upon completion of the rec center, and that'll finish our payments to them for that. Burlingame Square Transit Hub, I guess another name it's been referred to as the Caltrain Station Mobility Hub. And this project did receive grant funding. The $500,000 you see there under grants was actually awarded to the city by MTC. And the $200,000 general fund request is to fill out the match for that grant. The Alpine Park renovation project is a project to replace the play structure and provide some ADA improvements. The request, funding request is $350,000, and of that, $160,000 will come from the public facility impact fees for parks, and then the additional $190,000 is requested from the general fund. And there are existing funds currently available in the playground replacement fund that'll be used to supplement this to complete the project. The Town Square project, that's the plaza next to 220 Park, part of the post office project. $300,000 is being requested to bring the project through the design development phase. And just another comment to Councilmember Brownrick's question about some of the CIP in the out years. There was a large number in there in 24, 25, just to anticipate potential costs for the town square, depending on, you know, the level at which we decided to do the improvements there. So that would explain one of the high numbers there. Cuernavaca Park field renovations, this has been on the books for a while, but we're seeking $250,000 to be able to progress the design or complete the design of the project, and then we can get a better handle on what kind of funds are needed for construction. The trash receptacles, this was the project funded by the Solid Waste Fund, and it's just to purchase a portion of the trash receptacles needed to comply with the new requirements. The other pathway landscape improvements, eucalyptus tree management, city parks fencing, playground replacement fund. These are typical program areas. They have identified needs, and these budgets could not be eliminated this year. And so I think if you want more detail on these, Margaret can provide them, but they're just to progress the improvements citywide under these categories. The Laguna Playground renovation, the $50,000 is to begin the planning phase and kind of establish what the needs are at that park. The play equipment is also outdated there and in need of replacement. And then the annual tree replacement fund, $10,000 typically. It's always been $5,000, and this was to ensure the Tree City USA designation, I believe, but the cost of the trees has gone up significantly, so the request was to double that number. And then also listed here are projects which we typically fund through the CIP, and the synthetic turf replacement at the school district and Murray Field. I mean, these were just set aside funds. And so at this time, we're just recommending to not fund and look to advance funding in future years when, when the economy is a little better. And then same with the other two program areas, we're electing not to fund at this time. So the total for general fund for Parks and Rec is 2.585 mil. And again, I mentioned this a few times, that includes the 1.31 for the obligation to the school district. Now the bike ped and traffic improvements, and as mentioned before, this budget, a big portion of it, I mean, the number looks bigger maybe than it actually is, because there's a lot of grant money that's put in the budget that we're going to actually put in the CIP. But the point of that is to secure some match money and be ready to apply for the appropriate grants when they start coming out. We're hearing a lot about various grants that will be coming out later this year. So that's the point of a lot of these projects. Old Bayshore, you just saw that last month. And there's no general fund money. There's impact fees from the Bayfront that we're just proposing be budgeted in the event the appropriate grant becomes available for design development of that project. The sidewalk repair program, we're asking for a $200,000 general fund contribution. If you recall, in the past few years, we had not been contributing to this, and we're asking to begin restoring some of that contribution from the general fund. It's typically been funded to about 400,000 in previous years, and we've thought that it's appropriate time to start refunding that again. And then 1 million of Measure I is proposed for the sidewalk repair program, and then 100,000 from gas tax, which will be used to fund the curb and gutter improvements that are done with the project. Murchison, Truesdale, and Davis Bike Lane project. This is a project that we have applied for a grant, and that's why it's here. We applied for a TDA grant, and the grant amount was 400,000. The match that was proposed in the application was 600,000. So we're proposing that money come from the Measure A funds that we have available, so as not to impact the general fund. And then next, the Neighborhood Bike Boulevard project. We're anticipating that there may be funds available for this through grants. So we are requesting that 300,000 be allocated from the impact fees, public facility impact fees for transportation, and then assuming that this project will have some grant opportunities. Then the next three projects, California Drive, again, these are just kind of placeholders and looking for funding set aside in the event that the appropriate grant becomes available. The Broadway to Murchison, that's to look into developing the class 1 that's been talked about before, but this would just be for preliminary work. And then Oak Grove to Burlingame Avenue, and Burlingame Avenue to Peninsula. This would be for design work for those reaches. And then the next project listed, the MTC Quick Strike Pedestrian Safety Grant project. That is a project that we have received the grant funding for. We're awarded the 200,000 from an OBEG grant. And so the 80,000 match from Measure A is being proposed at this time. Then the next two projects, the traffic transportation studies, citywide ped safety improvements, requesting 50 grand from the general fund. The traffic and transportation studies, we're proposing to allocate additional 50,000 again from the public facilities impact fees, and pedestrian safety improvements. We're only asking 50,000. Some of the example, the Quick Strike project, the allocating 80,000 from Measure A as a match. It was originally intended to be taken out of the existing money for the citywide ped safety improvements, but we thought this was the opportune time to allocate the money from Measure A and then free up the 80,000 to be used on ped projects. And then here is the map showing the various locations of the bike ped traffic improvements. And you can see that the quick build project areas that are marked in the event that all the areas can't be done within that grant, we have additional funds to investigate the areas that aren't included. And then these are the areas that'll be addressed with the sidewalk repair program. And then moving on to building facility improvements. As stated earlier, there's no general funds that are being proposed for the building facility improvements this year. First project, police station ADA improvements is design money to complete the design of the men's and women's locker rooms, bring them up to ADA standards, and then do ADA improvements throughout the police station. And those impact fees fall under the public facility impact fees for police. And then at Donnelly Garage, the elevator is in need of a lot of new parts and a lot of reworking. So $200,000 there is requested from the parking fund. Then Fire Station 34 renovations, again, the public impact fees for fire are going to be utilized for design work for improvements at Fire Station 34, which will include some HVAC work, some other work to the facility, and then we'll go through and try to address some requests from the fire staff there. The next project is just a fund, is a set aside fund for roof replacements at city facilities, and that money is coming from public facility impact fees. And then parking and garages, all funded by the parking fund. Public parking lot resurfacing. Right now we're targeting Lot X, which is the lot next to the Lions Club and Community Center. After Community Center opens, we'll look at redoing that lot. And then the parking meters upgrade program would be to upgrade existing meters that need to be upgraded from 3G to 5G. And then this is a preliminary list of the streets that will be included in the street resurfacing project. And of note, California Drive, the Broadway to Oak Grove is included in that, which will be done in conjunction with the bike project on California. And this funding is all from gas tax Measure I and SB1. And I mean, this list is subject to a little change, which you'll see the final list in May. And so here's the various locations of the street resurfacing projects shown. So in summary, by program, this kind of goes through the recommendations and how they're distributed. And just again of note, the bike ped traffic improvements, a big portion of that is just is assumed grant money. So the number may not be real, but it was to get dedicated funding for matching funds. And yeah, you see the various distribution for these programs. And then going back again to the distribution of the funding, you see general fund again, 3.185. And I keep repeating myself, but of which 1.3 is from the previous obligation. And here's the distribution. And again, the 3.4 million in grants pushes this number up a little higher than may actually be the case. And so that's it. There's department staff is available to answer questions, or this is a time to provide feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Marmoto, and I will bring it back to colleagues. I see Councilmember Beach has her hand raised.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Mr. Marmoto, for the presentation. I really appreciate the way that staff has looked at our impact fees to leverage paying for some of these items, and also to help leverage grants coming across to have those placeholders. I think that's going to be really important. My only comment is just to echo, I fully support those placeholders, particularly in some of the flexible projects like the bicycle pedestrian projects. From what we're seeing at the county level, there will be more local funds available for bike ped projects and call for projects than we've had ever before. And then that's not even counting money from the federal government that's going to be passed through through MTC for a lot of those projects not only capital, but also we're anticipating a lot of planning grants. So if the council's will was to explore some of those Vision Zero policies, this would be a great year to take advantage of some of the planning grants that might be available from higher up. So thanks so much for your work on this and for explaining the context of the placeholders in the event that grants do come through.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is this more money from impact fees than we've seen before? It feels like it's a bigger source of income for us. And I see the city manager nodding her head. What's the underlying source for that increased revenue? Is that new development?
Mr. Martucci, you care to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's primarily the private development fee that has been collected over the years. In the past years, staff has not been able to make use of this fee because it has to amount to certain dollar value to be useful for the projects. But this year, it just happened, coincided the funding availability and the projects and the needs have all coincided for us to be able to use the funds. And the money primarily comes from the development fees that projects pay into for parks, roads, and storm drain, and all those type of infrastructure.
I thought that was probably the case. I just couldn't remember the number from last year, but I think it's helpful, even though it's a modest number in the overall scheme of our budget, just to be able to remind our constituents that people who are newcomers and building here are contributing to our environment, our parks, our streets. I think sometimes the perception is they're just take, and it's, I think, helpful to remember that, they're also putting in. So I appreciate that. And I generally try not to second guess this part of the budget because I know it's been through a lot of expertise. I do appreciate the emphasis on bikes and bike lanes and so forth. I think that's definitely the future for a lot of our residents. But I do have one issue I want to flag, and that is, and I say this knowing that El Camino Real is a state highway and knowing that we're going to do a wholesale upgrade of El Camino, but that upgrade is several years in the future. And I have to say that watching especially parents, but not just parents, cross El Camino near McKinley just scares me to death. And I just think we've been blessed that there hasn't been a tragedy there. And I wonder whether we should focus some time on that and some money, or is it really just not our job and we have to browbeat Caltrans?
Through the mayor, if I may respond to the question from the vice mayor. It is true that there are several locations along El Camino. The city is concerned about pedestrian safety, particularly in front of the school that you just mentioned. The concern is if the city does any improvement, it's a liability that we own, number one, and so we have to live with that. And secondly is that the project Caltrans is currently working on will happen, but it will take a few years. We are in negotiations with Caltrans staff to do some interim improvements at certain locations, and I believe McKinley is one of those locations. So I will have to confirm that, but we've been pushing Caltrans to do something in the interim before they come with a big project.
Thank you, Mr. Martuz. I really appreciate that. I suspect we all feel this way, but the number of people I see jaywalking there, and often with little kids in hand, it's just really kind of scary. I mean, I suppose we all do, but I drive El Camino a lot, and it's just not an uncommon thing to see people scurrying across El Camino like that. It just scares me. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I hope we can do something, even if it's a temporary fix, in advance of the full scale thing. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, any other comments, questions? I don't see any. So with that, let's open it to members of the public.
I see a hand up. So, John Martis.
Thanks, Megan. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. John Martos, resident and also chair of the Transportation Safety Parking Commission. I've been listening intently all evening, and first of all, I want to commend council and staff and city manager for taking the approach of being conservative with our funds and having such a big reserve fund to get us through this really terrible downturn. As Vice Mayor said, allowed city services to continue without any changes to the residents, and also continue some of the infrastructure projects. I was curious about the infrastructure projects, and I heard the talk about the transit occupancy tax going down so significantly. I was a little concerned about those infrastructure projects, the bike ped safety improvements, and even some of the building improvements. And then I heard Director Morimoto talk about all these projects coming up, and lots of projects coming up in the future. So I was wondering if with the grants that we're going after, if any of those grants have to do with the federal infrastructure bill, and if we could, aggressively pursue some of the money that could be available through the federal government to fund some of these larger things like the Broadway grade, sea level rise, and other things. And then, most of you may know that I was also chair and a member of the Burlingame Neighborhood Network. And so earthquake retrofit of key resources within our city. We're way overdue for an earthquake, and I hate to say that and bring doom and gloom, but I hope that a lot of the infrastructure projects that have gone on have secured some of our key infrastructures in the event that or when something happens. And then, I'll just say that I don't want to. One other thing I saw in Director Morimoto's presentation, I didn't see the Oak Grove Carolyn intersection by the high school listed there. And I know that's a very dangerous intersection that we had discussions on in the commission. And there was a draft plan of an improvement there with a signal. If that should be, in my opinion, considered as a potential project in the future, and hopefully the near future, if we can make that happen. Very busy intersection, very dangerous intersection right at the train tracks. But I didn't want to really end on a negative note, and so I will say that I live in the Lion Hogue area. I want to thank council and Public Works for all the development that was done with traffic calming in the Lion Hogue area. I've seen a lot of improvements, and I'll let you know that the opening of Victoria Park has been tremendous. I live right down the street, and I've seen lots of use of that park just in the last week. So thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for all that you are planning to do in the future. And this council's done a great job, and I really appreciate it. So I'll just end with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Martos, and thank you for your service. Madam City Clerk, do we have any other comments? I'm sorry, Mr. Morimoto, did you have a comment that you wanted to?
Oh, sorry. I just want to make a quick comment for Commissioner Martos. He asked about the Oak Grove Carolyn improvement there, and that project is on the books. I mean, today we went through new money, and the Oak Grove Carolyn project was previously funded, and it was slightly delayed just to coordinate better with the California Dry Bike Facility. So just to answer his question, that project is funded, and it is still on the books.
Thank you for that. And with that, Madam City Clerk, do you have any further?
Nope, that's
comment? It. That's it. Then I'm going to bring it back to my colleagues. I think Public Works is looking, or staff is looking for direction. So back to my colleagues for any comments. And I guess silence will assume that we like everything we see, huh? And which, yeah, but I'm with you there. So colleagues will take that to be, and all there is no action here other than direction, correct? Yeah, so direction appears to be that we like everything you presented. So so with that, let me know if there's anything else we need to do. Otherwise, we will move on to item number 6, which is adjournment. And just, I think I don't have anybody. Does anybody have something? I have somebody for Monday, but I don't have anybody for today to adjourn in their memory. But does somebody have anybody today? And having none, then we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. That was a lot of hard work. Thank you.